Keegan Murray goes for 47 points, 12 three-pointers in just an insane game where he broke so many different records. Like, if you looked hard enough, you could probably find 1,000 records that he broke. 12 three-pointers is the Kings record for threes in a game. He made 11 threes in a row at one point, which is a record, an NBA record. He's the youngest to make this many threes. Like, he scored 26 in a quarter, which is a Kings record for a quarter. And he now also owns the highest career high of any of the guys on the team, because Fox only has scored 44 as his career high, and Monk has only scored 45. So he gets the bragging rights now. I was hoping, I think at one point he was at 45 when he got taken out of the game at the start of the fourth quarter. And so I was thinking, well, he tied Monk there. But then shout out to the rest of the team for just absolutely playing horrible when Sabonis and Murray were off the court, bringing the Jazz back into it so Keegan could come back in the game. And I mean, going 12 for 13 from three at one point, like that's insane. 11 in a row. He heard the trade talk about, oh, should the Kings trade him for Lauri Markkanen, or would that be a good deal? Or the Raptors want him in a deal for Pascal Siakam or OG Anunoby, and then the report was the Kings see him as untouchable, and he kind of proved why. It was a few games ago where he had his first really good three-point shooting game of the season, and I said he was back at that point, and now he's even more than back. He's elevated to a whole nother level. He upped his three-point percentage in this game alone from 30.4% to, I believe it was 35.7%. Just an insane increase for one game. And, when guys go crazy from three, usually they just start chucking up shots, crazy heat checks. He was not doing that at all. And that's why he was so efficient. 12 for 15 is what he ended at from three. There were so many shots he could have taken. Like, he could have gone for the record, and he just didn't care. He was still moving the ball, only taking them when he was open. Got two really good looks in the fourth to try to tie it if he made both. One of them was really open, but he cooled off at that point. But when you look at Buddy Hield, he had the previous record in Kings franchise history for threes in a game at 11. He went 11 for 21 in that game. This is one of the most efficient 47-point games in NBA history. It has to be. And he picked a great time to do it, because coming into this game, De'Aaron Fox was out with the shoulder injury, and the Jazz have a lot of players out. And so it was one the Kings should definitely win. And Keegan was able to step up to make sure that really happened, and to make sure that it wasn't really close, because it kind of masked some of the Kings' problems. The Kings were not good when especially Sabonis and him were off the court. They were terrible. But it doesn't matter, because we get to be happy because Keegan just kept draining three after three. There was one point in that third quarter where it just felt like the Kings couldn't get a stop. And it didn't matter, because it's like, okay, yeah, you can have a layup on one end and he'll just go down and hit a three on the other end. When he got taken out of the game, the Kings fans in the arena, they were going through withdrawals. So they had to start their own Keegan Murray, it sounded like a call and response chant that they had got going there. And I felt bad for Scott Moak for, he was probably losing his voice chanting Keegan throughout the entire third quarter. And he did it all with the same expression on his face of just nothing. He just didn't care. And then he comes to the interview afterwards. He's like, yeah, I don't care about records. And that is why he is so loved in Sacramento. We saw a few smiles from him. I really wanted him to get 50, but I think he's just too selfless of a player for that. In this one, that's why he didn't get it, because he could have been just chucking up threes, but he wasn't. But there are still other things to talk about this game, not just Keegan Murray, even though he will be, the center of most of it. But coming out right away in this game, it was Sabonis, who was just super aggressive, scored the first 6 points. I think he had, was it 10 points in the first quarter, just going straight at Kelly Olynyk. Like, you have to punish the Jazz for starting Kelly Olynyk at center. But even when Walker Kessler came in the game, he was still bullying him. He was still pushing him out of the way. And Sabonis ended the game 9 for 10 from the field, 20 points. He got his 10 rebounds. He had 0 assists in the first half because he was just bullying his way inside to score. But he ended with 8 assists, and I think all of them were in the third quarter, with half of them, I believe, going to Keegan Murray. And so him being aggressive, I think, just opened everything up, especially for Keegan. And the Jazz tried to go to a box and one against him for most of the game, which was interesting to watch. And it worked. There were some possessions at times it worked where the Kings were just trying to get him the ball the entire possession, and they couldn't get it to him in time, I guess, giving him enough time to go to work. But for the most part, the Jazz could not stop the Kings when Sabonis was on the court. But for as many threes as we hit in this game, I mean, most of them coming from Keegan, we started out this game just attacking the rim over and over again, and it was great. And then the bench came in, started chucking the threes, and they were falling, which got us out to a lead, but a little too many threes, and in the second quarter, just too many threes, and there was a lineup of Davion, Monk, Sasha, Lyles, and JaVale. That lineup is absolutely horrible. Like, immediately they gave up 2 wide open threes to kind of bring the Jazz back into it. Then, there were a few nice plays where it was Monk to JaVale in the 2-man game. Davion had a nice drive, but then the second quarter, like, they could just not score at all. Like, the first 3 minutes at least, they didn't score. And at that point, I was just thinking, you have to stagger Keegan's minutes with Sabonis's minutes with Fox out. Like, you cannot have, with Herter in foul trouble, he picked up some really early fouls, like 3 early fouls. One of them was a super clean block. And I thought he got unlucky with some of the foul calls in this game. But with that just full bench lineup, there was just no offense. When you have Davion and JaVale both out there at the same time, it's just not good for the offense. And the only way we were going to score was Monk hitting a 3 or Trey Lyles hitting a 3. And Lyles was 0 for 2, and Monk ended the game 4 for 12 from 3 and 6 for 16. So he wasn't super efficient from the field. And so that bench unit, the entire game was just really bad. I mean, we could not score. We couldn't really get stops. Well, in the second quarter, we could. In the second half, we could not get stops, really, with any unit. But the starting lineup was great. Harrison Barnes had a really nice game. He went 3 for 5 from 3. I thought he started off pretty aggressive. The Kings were just going right at Walker Kessler, which was nice to see. Kevin Herter, after picking up that foul, and he was frustrated, so he just went straight into the paint right at Kessler and scored. That was good to see. It was nice. It was a nice bounce back game from both Herter and Barnes from a few rough games from both of them. And Herter didn't take the most shots, but he went 4 for 6 from the field, 2 for 4 from the 3-point line. He had 5 assists with no turnovers. Again, had the foul trouble, but I thought it was just a nice game where he didn't really force too much. Like, I thought at one point he kind of looked a bit hesitant, but he was getting his offense in the flow of it. And so hopefully he's kind of gotten his confidence back a bit. He's just a very streaky player. But Barnes, I thought, was good on both ends of the floor. His rebounding was the main thing I noticed. He had a couple of nice offensive rebounds, which he's had in the past, like 2 games now. He's had some nice offensive rebounds, and I thought his rebounding on the defensive end was good as well. And then Keon Ellis had an interesting game. He ended up getting ejected. He picked up a double technical with Colin Sexton, I believe it was, at one point, which we didn't ever really get to see on the broadcast what happened. They didn't show it. And then in the fourth quarter, he got like stripped in transition. And I didn't really see if it was a foul, but he obviously thought it was a foul. and I thought it was two pretty weak technicals from what I saw, but I didn't totally see the first one. But obviously, getting ejected when you're a player trying to kind of earn your spot, it's not great to get ejected, but it wasn't that big of a deal. Obviously, at that point, we pretty much had the game locked up. Like, we put the starters back in because the Jazz kind of made a run, but the starters then kind of got it together and were able to close it out, obviously, even without Keon. But Keon went 0 for 3 from 3, but he had 7 assists. He got stripped a few times handling the ball. You can see he's not truly comfortable just being the main ball handler, and I don't really expect him to be that. But he was making some pretty good decisions other than him getting stripped. It was the defensive end where he wasn't great off ball. I thought for the most part he was pretty good with active hands. And the Kings were doing pretty well, especially in the first half, of contesting shots at the rim, not bailing them out with fouls, getting their hands on balls. And they never let Utah score 30 points in a quarter, which was great. But it's not that big of an accomplishment. It's the Jazz. But you play who's in front of you. Like, they were missing some wild shots. Like, not even necessarily surprising that they would miss, but how badly they were missing. They missed so much at the rim. But it was Colin Sexton that was giving the Kings the most trouble. He had 28 points in this one, and he went by Keon Ellis a lot. And he backdoor cut him. Herter was on him. That did not work at all. Again, just getting fried, backdoor cut. So Sexton was definitely a problem, and Keon was really struggling with him. And I think those are just the learning moments that Keon is going to have in the NBA as a young player who's finding his way. So I'm not too worried about that. The Kings went small again, kind of how they have been doing it for a while now, where JaVale gets his 4 minutes in the first half. It doesn't really go well. And so then we go small in the second half. In the first half, there was no space at all with Davion and JaVale both out there. Monk was really having trouble. I thought he settled for some shots, but also it's harder to get into the lane to find space when you have it more clogged up. And so he just kind of had to settle for threes. Lyles had to settle for threes. It got a little better in the second half when they went small, but it still was not a great game for the bench. Lyles couldn't really get anything going. I thought his defense was solid. He was guarding Lauri Markkanen a lot of the times and was doing a solid job there. I thought the Kings' rebounding in this one was really good. They won the rebounding battle by 8. Utah got 9 offensive rebounds to the Kings, 8 offensive rebounds, but I thought the Kings' defensive rebounding was really good. Sasha had some really impressive boards, and Barnes was really good. Lyles was really good. Sabonis was great. Sasha didn't have the greatest minutes at first, and so he didn't really see the court too much. He only had 11 minutes in this one. But when he did come back in later in the game, he was making some really nice passes. He was the guy who made the pass, I think, to Keegan to get him his last basket to get to 47 points. And he made another really nice pass to Chris Duarte, where Duarte just smoked a wide open layup. And I noticed that last game as well. I think the last 2 games before this one, Sasha has kind of been showing off his passing a little bit more. And that's something that I saw out of him at Olympiacos, and I feel like haven't seen as much before these last few games, but now we're starting to see it more, and I think he's just settling in more and more. And I think when you watch those garbage time lineups, Sasha just looks like the most confident player out there and looks like the guy who knows what he's doing the most. And so I think just as he continues to get more time in the NBA, I think he's going to continue to grow as an impactful player in the rotation. When he works from the high post or even just out on the 3-point line, his passing is just really, really good to cutting players. Another guy whose passing was good was Keegan Murray, who, he didn't pass too much. He was shooting a lot, but he did have some nice moments where obviously he was on fire, but he passed up some threes and would feed it right back into Sabonis because everyone's closing on him, but he would see Sabonis get really deep position and just feed it right to him because Sabonis had it going as well. And he had that mismatch down low. So I really liked that. Not forcing the threes, but instead looking for the really high percentage look inside. That's something the Kings have not done enough of. And I think the Kings have been pretty poor in getting it into Sabonis when he does have position. And so it's good to see someone doing that. And that's a part of Keegan's game that we haven't seen a lot is his passing. And so it's good to see him utilizing his gravity as a shooter. He's gaining all the attention onto him, and then he's able to find other players off of that. And he was making some nice plays inside the arc too, made that really nice like leaning fadeaway that I feel like always goes in for him. When he's off balance, taking mid-rangers over smaller players, like I always think it's going in. But he also had a great defensive game. And so he really just put it all together. What we know he can do, he put it all together into this game. And I loved that Domas just kept looking for him, and then Monk was looking for him out there, and his teammates really wanted him to keep scoring and were feeding him. And I think everyone just wanted him to shoot more than he was. There were definitely some moments in that third quarter where they were letting the Jazz get into the paint a little too easily. And there was one moment, I don't know if this was in the third quarter, but the Kings made a free throw, and then the Jazz immediately inbounded it to Colin Sexton, who just had a one-on-one with Kevin Huerter down the court and went right at him. And that has happened way too much recently, where the Kings, they get in their flow offensively, but they just allow the other team to go right back on the other end and score. And Keegan was hitting three after three after three, and then you look up and it's like, it's only an 18-point game. Like, this is a historic shooting night, and we're only up 18 after we had like a 10-point lead coming into the half, or a 12-point lead coming into the second half. And Keegan has gone 7 for 7 from three, and we're only up like 18. Like, what are we doing? And he probably wasn't 7 for 7 at that point, because then the Kings were able to extend it at the end of the third quarter there quite a bit. But that's definitely something the Kings need to clean up on, because you can't let, obviously it's fine against the Jazz. They're not going to punish us. But against other teams, we need to be better at putting teams away. But I just really enjoyed this one because it was a pretty much low stress, just having a good time, especially in that third quarter, watching our guy knock down three after three after three, and it never got worried that we were going to lose this game. And that's how it should be a lot of the time. Obviously, it's not going to happen all the time, but a lot of times against teams like the Jazz, when we're at home, they're missing players, even if we don't have De'Aaron Fox. And I think it's good for the Kings to be able to figure out how to win without De'Aaron Fox. And I think it's good for Keegan to figure out how he can continue to score when teams lock in to him on the three-point line. Now, this wasn't the biggest test, because even after he had hit three after three after three, somehow he still just kept getting wide open. Like, what are the Jazz doing? That's how it was last season with Keegan, where it's like, this guy's a 40% three-point shooter, and he just keeps getting wide open. Like, I don't know what's happening. Like, is his movement just that good? Is it everyone else on the Kings? I mean, obviously, the Kings offense usually, especially when you have Fox in there, it's really hard to defend. It's pick your poison. So he's going to get open sometimes. But it was wild how many times they were just leaving him open when he obviously could not miss. But they did key in on him a bit, and so it was nice to see him, like, especially back cut for his last basket, where it's like, that's how you utilize your shooting gravity. And then you back cut. Sasha found him, and he gets the easy two. And there were a few other moments where he was, dribbling inside the arc and going to the floater. And he went like 1 for 2 on those in the fourth quarter, either early fourth quarter or late third quarter there. It's just wild. It goes to show you how efficient the 3-point shot is, like how much better shooting threes is than shooting twos at times. Because you look at De'Aaron Fox, just when he gets 40, he's fighting for everything most of the time, and he's getting inside, getting fouled. And then Keegan Murray's just out there shooting threes, and in 23 shots, he's able to get 47 points. It's like, oh, that's why teams just shoot a bunch of threes now. Hopefully, we see Fox try to get back at him, and retake the career high points mark for this team. But it's pretty funny that Keegan Murray has the highest career high now on this entire team in his second year, at the start of his second year. And now people can stop sleeping on Keegan, because I saw people out there tweeting this was one of the most random 47-point games, big scoring nights. And I'm like, I don't know about that. Like, it's definitely not that random. I think everyone watching the Kings knew at some point he was going to explode. Like, maybe not this efficiently or for 47 this year, but this ain't no Corey Brewer going for 50 points. And this ain't Sadiq Bey going for 50 points. Like, this is a star in the making here, and maybe people will wake up a little bit to that now. I think the last guy that I didn't really touch on too much is Davion Mitchell. I mean, I touched on how his spacing out there was not great, especially with JaVale, and his 1 3-point shot looked bad. And he had like 2 nice drives. One at the end of the first quarter, and then one was in the second half. But it just feels like those are such isolated moments. Like, he always has those 1 or 2 drives, and it's never consistent. It never feels like it's fully within the flow of the offense, and he's just not a good enough defender. Like, even when Keon Ellis is out there going 0 for 3 from 3 and getting ejected from the game, like, it's still, you can see why Keon has the rotational spot, because he's still has active hands. He's getting beat by Colin Sexton just like Davion would have. Let's be honest. He got beat because he wasn't big enough and strong enough to guard Sexton. Neither is Davion. But Keon is still, I think, contributing in other ways that Davion really can't. It definitely would have been interesting to see how this game would have gone if Keegan wasn't on fire like that. Like, would it have been close, or was it the Kings not locking in on defense as much because they were just up by a lot and Keegan just kept banging threes and other guys were hitting as well? Like, Barnes at one point was kind of on fire. I mean, I think it's normal to kind of play down to your opponent. And I also think it's normal to drop off a bit when you have a lead like that. So really, it was just cool to see Keegan finally put it all together. And now, theoretically, things get even easier in the Kings' schedule as they stay at home and are going to go up against the Washington Wizards, who are 4-20 on the season. No idea if Fox will be back. I think it's probably one of those injuries where he would be playing if it was a more important game. But the Kings obviously don't need him to win these games, and so he can kind of just rest up and get his shoulder right. And the game against the Wizards, there's not much more I can say other than just don't play absolutely horribly and you'll win this game. Like, the Wizards are horrible. If Kyle Kuzma and Jordan Poole want to shoot 35-footers all game, or Kyle Kuzma wants to just shoot turnarounds all game, like, that's fine. This should be an easy win for the Kings, and then the next 3 games should be tougher. But there's always a possibility that it's a closer game than we think it should be. But even if that does happen, I got faith that the Kings will be able to pull it out. There was a game similar to this last season that the Kings lost to the Wizards, where it was like, yeah, we should easily win this game. Now, the Wizards definitely weren't as bad last season as they are now, but there was that disappointing game. I think we lost to the Hornets too in that stretch, and so I think it would be an improvement, kind of show improvement from last season to this season, especially on home court, where we look better than we were last season so far this season. I think it would show improvement if we could just kind of win the games that we definitely should be winning. Even if it's close, you just find a way to win. So anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. I will be back on Monday to recap that game against the Washington Wizards. Keegan Murray is the best, and I will see you guys then. Peace.